Both Lexus and Genesis are really stepping up their design game in their crossovers and SUVs. So in this video, we're going to have a look at the brand new Lexus RX, compare it to the Genesis GV80. We're going to talk a little bit about spec and tech and then jump into photoshopping, you know the drill. Talk about the front, side, and rear and also the interior. And I'm going to show you the old Lexus RX, compare it to the new one, because I know a lot of people don't like the new grille design of the RX, but I'm a huge fan and I'm going to let you know why in this video. So the Lexus, I think, is going to go on sale later this year. I don't think it's on sale right now. And it comes with powertrains ranging from 246 horsepower up to 367 horsepower. In the top of the line, all-wheel drive RX 500 HF Sport Performance. 19-inch wheels are standard across the entire lineup. However, you can do 21-inch optional wheels, which is obviously something that you have to do. On the interior, we have an optional 14-inch touchscreen, and it will start at around $50,000 for the base model and top out at around $70,000 for the RX 500h F Sport Performance, which I honestly think is a pretty good deal. The Genesis comes in with engine options ranging from a base 300 horsepower turbocharged 2.5 liter 4-cylinder up to a 375 horsepower twin turbo 3.5 liter V6, and that's basically the one you want. All GV80s come standard with all-wheel drive, and the Prestige trim comes with the gorgeous 22-inch wheels, which I think fill out the wheelhouses so nicely, and it's definitely something that I would put on my Genesis GV80. In the interior, you have a 14.5-inch infotainment touchscreen as standard, and prices start at around $64,000 up to almost $80,000 for the top trim level. So let's have a look at these designs here. I'm a huge fan of both of these cars, so which one I would buy is actually going to be a pretty hard decision, but they have two very different approaches to the design. When you look at the GV80 up here, for example, I think the proportions, we're going to have a look at more of that in the side view, but it feels like to me that the GV80 Genesis looks more like, it looks bigger than the Lexus RX down there, and it feels more SUV-ish, while this feels more almost like a lifted hatchback, if that makes sense. The graphics in the GV80 is some of my favorite graphics right now because they are really nailing their design identity. Look at this big grille. People talk about BMW having too big of a grille, but this is like a big whale mouth in the front end with this big grille, and it's not really separated by graphics inside. We only have this mesh styling that goes all across from one end of the grille to the other, and it creates this big front fascia, but it works well. It works better than BMW because I think the graphic features in the front end just work well together in the GV80. And then we have these two simple lines for headlights, and simplicity is the name of the game these days. You want to simplify design. We're gonna definitely talk more about that when I show you the old RX and compare it with the new one, and why I really prefer this one. The Lexus down here, very clean design. They cleaned it up in a very cool way. I do love this new grille because look at this. It goes from the body panel itself. So we have body panel with a couple of holes in it down here, and then it kind of morphs into the actual grille down here. It's a very unique approach, and I appreciate Lexus taking some risk with this because this is something I've never seen before, a grille that kind of morphs from the indents that we have in the grille in the body panel right here and then into the actual grille. Very cool design. I love this sharpness that we have in Lexus these days. It looks like the designers just sat around with a ruler. They always had a ruler at hand and just draw straight lines and cuts that look super sharp and super fresh and crisp. And that's kind of what Lexus is doing with their design language right now. Looking at the side view, what I like about the Genesis up here, it looks massive, and that is thanks to this long shoulder line that goes all the way from one end and then dips beautifully down here. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the big Lincoln SUVs. They have the same dip to this design. The further back you go in the design, the more it dips, giving it this forward motion with the mass being centered somewhere in this point, and then it tapers off the further back we go, giving it some speed look looking at it from a side view. And the graphics also works really well. We have these headlights going into the side indicators right here in the same line and then stretching to the taillights in the same height and same location as we have the rest of the lights, the side and the front lights. And the overhangs just look beautiful as well. Very short overhang in the front end, comparing it to a longer overhang in the rear, also emphasizing this forward movement. And these are the 22-inch Prestige wheels, which is something that I would definitely get for this. This is a big car. It needs to have wheels that look proportionally correct to the rest of the volume of the car. The greenhouse as well, simply done. One line going in here, then continues into this roof spoiler up here. Beautiful design. Looking at the Lexus, completely different design direction here from Lexus, with a lot more styling, but it's still very much cleaned up from the previous generation. We still have the same type of greenhouse that we have in the old generation, with these graphic features right here being black, for example. And this is the only issue that I have with this design. Everything else is sharp. Look at this side view and look at all the lines and surfacing here. You can see that everything has a sharp line to it, except for this piece. So this is one piece that I wish they kept from the old generation and had this piece be more sharp. Now it looks very undefined. It has too much fluidity to it in comparison to the rest of the body and what's going on in the surfacing. But now we have clear round wheelhouses like this, and these are, I believe, the 21-inch wheels. I would probably maybe go with something 22s like we have on the GV80. And you can see that the overhangs are much longer on the Lexus in the front than it is in the rear, and this makes it look a little more static than the Genesis, but I think it's still a beautiful looking design, specifically for being a crossover or an SUV. So let me show you the old one, the RX, comparing it to the new one, so you can see just how much of a over-styling the old RX is. It's just so much going on here. We have this shoulder line right here, starting here and then going into the hood, into the grille, which is pretty nice. This also has a slight curvature to it in the rear end. Then we have another line up here, and then we have a third line going in from this curvature, going in to this point, which then cuts and goes down like this. But here you can see we have more sharp line in the lower part, which I think they should have implemented in the new one as well. And the grille looks pretty cool, but it's still a very undefined outline for the grille, because we have this curvature here that I don't know if they intended it to be this curvature or if they wanted to have it straight. It has this lack of confidence to the front end grille, in my opinion. And then we have more lines in the hood right here. So comparing this to the new design, we also have this fog light down here in this graphic feature, which has a lot of angles to it as well. So comparing it to the new one, just look at how much cleaner the new one is. And for me, it's hard to see why anyone would prefer the old one over this new beautiful face. Now we have two parallel lines here. We have this intake being cleaned up and more defined, more confidence in these lines right here. We have the fog light being this tiny light in the bottom of this graphic feature. And of course, the shoulder line. Now, instead of having three separate lines going right here, we now have one line going from the C-pillar into the front end, into the lights, creating this Lexus identifier, which is the L light, the sharp line that we have the check mark in the front end. And in addition to a very much simpler grille than we have in the old one, a lot going on top of the grille. Here it's super clean, and we have this shelf here, which I really like as well. And then we talked about the grille. However, looking at this line down here, it goes from sharp into softness here. I want to have more of a sharp design here to bring all the graphic features and all the lines in together more clearly. Looking at the rear view, both of these designs, I think this is the money shot for both of these designs. I love this Genesis, what we have in all Genesis right now. It's almost like an ellipse that encapsulates or frames the graphic features of the rear end, in combination with very simple graphics for the tail lights, and also overall very simple graphic and surfacing for the tail end of the Genesis. Beautifully done. And here you can see these are not the 22-inch wheels, and it just doesn't look nowhere near as good as when you have the 22s on the Genesis GV80. Looking at the Lexus, we now have a clear, thick LED bar going from one end to the other. I love the dynamic feeling that we have because it's thicker here, as you can see, going into very thin just underneath the Lexus logo, and then going back to thick on the other side. Beautiful sculpturing of the internal parts of the taillights. We also have the same treatment of the surfaces in the rear. For example, these lines right here, we have the lower intake or outtake in the outlet in this case, in combination with these lines going into the center of the Lexus logo. Everything is kind of pointing inwards towards the Lexus logo, and that's one of these Lexus design features that's been around for a while, and you can see the same styling. Everything is pointing into the Lexus logo, just like they do in the rear end as well, creating a strong brand identity. We have a very interesting diffuser down here as well, body colored. This is the RX 500H. This is the top of the line. Personally, I would definitely get this in white. I love white Lexuses. You can see all the sculpturing on these in the surfaces, and it just brings out the design more. So very well done from both of these companies. Two completely different philosophies, but they both work really well. Now let's look finally on the in the interiors here. You can see that the Lexus, for example, comparing this Lexus design to the Genesis, totally different as well. What I do like, which one I prefer here, is definitely going to be the Genesis, and the reason for that is because we have a touchscreen up here, but it's pretty far away. If you're sitting and driving here and reaching over to the touchscreen, which is on top of the dash, it's gonna be a bit of a stretch. So what they did is implemented tactile buttons and controls right here, where you can control everything that goes on in the screen, and I love that. I would just reach down and do whatever I want instead of stretching all the way up to the top of the dash, do whatever I need to do. And in addition to that, we have a full digital screen that has this beautifully sculptured house that it sits within, creating this old school feel, but in a new modern way, specifically when we talk about the full digital gauge cluster. Looking at the Lexus, this feels a lot more Toyota to me. A massive screen here. This is optional, and we have some angles to the outline of the screen as well. Very Toyota style in this design, but we don't have as many tactile buttons as we have right here. We don't have these dials in the center console in here that we have on the Genesis. So you have to do everything by touchscreen on the screen, except for, I guess these are for the climate control or maybe the radio or something like that. Basic functions, but I want to have more tactile features inside of the interior, because it's going to make it a whole lot easier, specifically when you're driving. For example, when I'm driving my Tesla, I don't like that I have to touch the screen for every single setting. It's kind of unsafe. When you're driving, your finger's gonna bounce all around the screen, and it's very hard to be precise with what you actually want to do. So in this case, I'm gonna go for the Genesis on the interior. So which one of these would I pick? It's a very tough choice for me because I love them both. I think they both look really, really great. But if I had to pick one, I'm gonna go with the larger volumes and the larger Genesis GV80, because I like the proportions better. I like the overhang being shorter in the front and longer in the rear. I love the graphic features of this design with the two lines that goes all around the car, from the front light to the side to the rear. And of course the 22-inch wheels just sets this design off very beautifully. Let me know which one you would pick between these two. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.